When we talk about balancing in video games, we are often referring to multiplayer games because if something in a multiplayer game is unbalanced, really unbalanced, it can create a lot of frustration and it can limit a lot of choices because we as people, especially when it comes to competitive stuff, we like to go for the dominant strategy. And a dominant strategy in a multiplayer game, for example a shooter or a fighter game, is to use the best thing possible, the thing that is very meta. And so, if that thing dominates, especially very strongly, you are probably facing a lot of frustration if you try to use something different than that, because you're gonna get overwhelmed, you're gonna get beaten very easily, and it's not gonna be very fun. So we try to balance games in multiplayer settings in order to have as much variety as possible so that skill is the most important factor. But what about when we talk about single-player games? Single-player games is a different category altogether, but is it really? Because single-player games, they are often more structured. They have a more clear structure and a more clear vision in a developer's mind in how they want the A to B to C to D experience for the player to be. It is taking the players on a journey most of the time, or at least very often when it comes to single player games. When it comes to multiplayer, it is more a arena, an experience in short bursts that you are trying to give to the players. But with single player games, it is much more of a journey most of the time, or at least very often. It's a journey where you are tailoring the experience to the player. And how do you do that? You do it through rules. I think rules is a very golden rule if we're going to pinpoint something when it comes to game design. Rules are essentially what makes up a game. It can be any game, really, that we play in the real life as well. It can be hide and seek, for example. We have rules that are established because those rules and following those rules is exactly what makes the game what it is. Because when we are limited to those rules and we succeed, we feel like we have succeeded, we have won, we feel accomplished, we feel satisfied and rewarded because we have been bound by those rules, and despite that, we have learned them, mastered them, and come out on top and beat the game. Rules really help us shape the experience. It helps us to give a sense of progression and reward and satisfaction for players, because you take them on a journey that you, as the developer, has designed. You have designed an experience that you want to give. This is not just for video games, but it is for writing books or making a film as well. Making movies, writing stories, anything like that, you kind of do the same thing. You are limiting the audience or the reader or whatever it is to whatever information they have at that point, and you are forcing them into the situation where the story is going, and the reader or the watcher just have to go along with it and see how they feel and how they react to it. So you can really tailor the experience how you want when you tell a story. And it's the same thing with video games. And for open world games or very sandboxy games, there are a much bigger sense of freedom, obviously, from the developer's intention. You have much more freedom to do what you want, to create your own objectives, to create your own goals, and they do that in a way where they compensate by making the fun something else than having a limited goal and limited progression to follow. They can make the fun of having the movement around a huge world be very satisfying to do and to master and to play around with. A playground, basically. Or they can make it like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, where you still have goals, but exactly how you tackle them and when and in what order is up to you. You're creating this kind of a mix where you have goals and you have restrictions, you have rules, but you can much more easily manipulate them and go around them and really tackle them in any way you want. Even Minecraft. one of the most open world games ever made and the most sandboxy games ever made, still has rules and it still has progression and goals. You have enchantment, getting new block types, finding new biomes, new structures, enchantment, as I said, and getting new armor, finding the end, finding the nether, getting potions, etc., which makes survival easier. You get stronger and you get access to new stuff to build with. So there's still a lot of progression in Minecraft that you can or can choose not to interact with. But my problem comes with, and also which is the whole motivation for making this video in the first place, comes with a certain argument that is brought up a lot, or at least a lot in certain communities, in regards to games that are designed to have rules, to have progression, to have difficulty, and have also mechanics that are there to break them, to break those rules. And that argument is essentially, well, it's a player versus enemy game. It's a single-player game, so if there is a mechanic you don't like, or a mechanic you think is too powerful and makes the game too easy, you can just choose not to use it. You can choose to never interact with that item or that character, or even never press that button. It's completely up to you. So if you don't like it, you can just choose not to use it. And I have never liked that argument at all, because I think it goes completely against what makes a game into what it is. In a video game, you are really entering a visual world and you get the illusion of controlling this world, of manipulating and entering and living in this world and interacting with it. And you do that through these rules that I talked about, these settings, these rules, these limitations. You are bound to them just like we are bound in this real world. And that creates the opportunities, that creates the challenges, that creates the rewards of going through challenges and being rewarded for it. That is why, for example, difficulty modes exists in games, because you are still limited to certain rules and boundaries, but you can choose which versions of those rules you are forced to be bound to. So if you have a mechanic, which is, to put it drastically, in an instant win button that you can use, but you're not forced to use it, but you have the opportunity to use it, then to me it doesn't matter if you use it or not. Just the fact that it exists ruins much of the illusion of the game, because this mechanic is very much part of the game, just like everything else. It's a core mechanic, it is programmed there, it is not a mod, it is not something of the sorts. It is there, made by the developers, put in there, ready for you to use. And if it is there without risk, without any price, without any payoff or consequences or whatever, it is simply an instant win button. And what's the point? Yeah, you can choose not to use it, of course, but at that point, you enter a stage which I called the pretend stage. You are pretending that a game is more difficult than it is. And when you have to start to pretend a video game is different from what it is, then we have a problem, in my opinion. For example, if you can just pretend that the mechanic don't exist and choose not to use it, you can do that for anything. You can put that logic to any mechanic in game. For example, if you think a game is too easy, you can just make a rule for yourself that every time you take damage, for example, then you have to also forcefully take an extra hit of damage, just to make the game feel more difficult. But does that make the game more difficult? Or are you just pretending that the game is more difficult? To me, it is the latter, and I don't like it. To give a better example of what I mean and why I mean this, I'm gonna give you two examples. One of them is from Call of Duty Zombies, and the other one is from The Legend of Zelda. It is two franchises that I really like, but they have done some things that I'm not a huge fan of. Let's start with Zombies. So Zombies is a side mode in Call of Duty, and the concept there is very simple on the surface. Basically, it's a horde mode, where you defeat a bunch of zombies, and if you do that without dying, you progress to the next round, where there will be more zombies, it will be slightly faster, and it will be slightly more of them, and basically every single round will get tougher and tougher and tougher, and You get stronger weapons and you save up money by defeating the zombies to be able to buy more gear and buy different buffs and weapons and upgrades of sorts. So basically it is a resource game where you have to get stronger yourself by spending your resources wisely. What should I prioritize getting next? And how do I maximize the amount of money that I can get in order to get as strong as possible, as quickly as possible, in order to make my chances of survival higher. And that is a really addicting concept, which I really like to this day. But then, one year, in one of the titles, they introduced something that I'm not a fan of. They are called the Gobble-Gums, and they basically act like a microtransaction, unfortunately, for this single-player mode. This player versus enemy mode. And these Gobble-Gums basically allow you to break these rules that the game is confined by, that this game is limited by and boxed into. For example, one thing that you can buy in this mode is called perks, and you save up money and you can buy perks, and they give you different boosts. For example, be able to reload your weapon faster or get more HP, etc. But in this game that first introduced these Gobble-Gums, you had a limit. You could only buy 4 perks, and after that you were locked. You only had 4 slots to fill. Even though there were maybe 8 different perks to choose from in a map, you could only fill 4 slots. You had to pick which 4 do I want. But these Gobble-Gums, one of them for example, allowed you to not just break this limit of 4 perks, but they allowed you to get every single perk that was available for free with a single button press. Yeah, and instantly that creates a problem, because suddenly at your hand, at your disposal, right there in your hand, right in front of you, you can just press a button and get all 8 or 9 perks immediately like that, without any effort. Or you could, go round by round, saving up money, saving up these points as they're called, and buy 1 perk at a time and be limited to 4 at a time. And, you spend all your points that you have at your disposal to get 4 perks, and then you have to save up more points or money in order to buy other stuff. And so, what do? Do you go for option A or B? And this is where the concept that I talked about comes in, where it doesn't really matter if you use this mechanic or not. Just the fact that it exists ruins the satisfaction, the reward that you get by playing by the rules. And so if you have to pretend that this rule-breaking mechanic doesn't exist, it also takes away of the satisfaction. Because here's the interesting thing. There are certain ways in the different maps in order to break that limit just by playing the game and doing some hidden quests and such in the maps, right? But often, you can only do this once per map, or sometimes maybe 2, which means you can get 1 extra perk, so you can get 5 instead of just 4. And previously, in previous games before this was really satisfying because the rules said you can only get 4. But if you do this quest and put in the effort, you can break that limit and get 5, maybe even 6. In this game that introduced these Gobble-Gums, I tried to do that once on the same map that was also featured in a previous game, and with that I mean I tried to do this quest that allowed you to get an extra perk beyond the 4 perk limit. I did that once and never again. And do you know why? Because the satisfaction was simply not there. Because even though I didn't use Gobble-Gums, I knew in the back of my mind that I just put in a lot of effort into getting this extra 5th perk. But I don't feel rewarded at all, because I knew that at any point during this, I could have just walked over and pressed a single button and then gotten all 8 or 9 perks for free instantly with a button press. So why do I bother go through the effort of doing this quest then? And that's what I mean with don't like it, just don't use it. Doesn't work for me. Because just as long as the mechanic exists and it's part of the game, it is also part of the rules of the game. And so, why do you want to go through trouble to get the same reward as you could get without any trouble at all? For example, to take a hypothetical example of Call of Duty Zombies, to, put it a bit, in an extreme hypothetical situation. In the game, or in all of Call of Duty Zombies games, a tradition is to have something called wonder weapons, which are these fantastical weapons that are unique to each and every map, and everyone is excited about what is going to be the wonder weapon of the next Zombies map, right? What is going to be this ultimate weapon of this map. And often you can get it through luck by spitting a mystery box which gets you a random weapon, by spending points, or sometimes, or most of the time these days, you can go through a quest, which is often can be difficult, at least for new players, but your reward is you get this wonder weapon guaranteed. It's a great system. Now, hypothetically, let's say you had a Call of Duty Zombie map where you have an extremely powerful wonder weapon available, and you can get it by going through a very difficult quest. You can get it by going through a quest that has a lot of steps, that costs a lot of points, and the chances of dying is very high. So there's a high risk of failing, but the reward in the very end is this wonder weapon. Now, imagine in the same map, you can also walk over to a wall and you can buy the wonder weapon for 10 points, which you get from a single bullet into a zombie. You don't have to use it. You don't have to go and buy the wonder weapon off the wall. Nobody's forcing you to. But do you see the problem here? Why at all would you go through this lengthy quest when that very same map, as a completely normal mechanic, has that same wonder weapon available there for you to buy on round 1 at the very beginning of the game for basically free? You can choose to do either of these methods, but why would you choose the difficult one and the lengthy one and the difficult one and the expensive one over the other? Do you know what would happen if I, and probably many others as well, have gone through that lengthy quest and get the wonder weapon that way? They would probably, and I know I would be, feeling quite cheated. I would feel robbed. I would feel like I have done something completely unnecessary. Put in too much work that gave me nothing. Because when the wonder weapon is available there for that price, that says something about the value of it. You don't want to spend $1,000 on something that is worth 10. The other example I had is of The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. And it's a bit different example. It is not a don't like it, don't use it kind of situation, but it's more of a difficulty balance example of why that is important. Because The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker is one of the first games I ever played. I love the game for so many reasons. But one of the things I don't like all that much about the Wind Waker is its difficulty. Wind Waker is extremely easy. It is possibly the easiest Zelda game there is. Enemies attack very slowly. Enemies do very little damage. And you are extremely powerful with many tools at your disposal. Now, when Nintendo released the Wind Waker HD for the Nintendo Wii U, an HD remaster of the game, they also included Hero Mode. And Hero Mode was the game's hard mode, essentially. And now, what did Hero Mode do? It did two things. One, it doubled the damage of all enemies. And number two, it removed natural HP pickups that you can get from cutting grass or breaking pots, etc. So in order to heal yourself, you had to, buy potions or get fairies, etc. The problem with Hero Mode in the Wind Waker is that when I played Hero Mode, I felt essentially nothing was different compared to normal. And that is because the double damage dealt by enemies is really not a threat at all when enemies, to begin with, are so slow and easy to dodge. When you get hit so few times when playing this game, because dodging enemies is easy, you even have a counter mechanic in the game, and enemies attack slowly, getting hit in the first place is not something that happens often. and so just boosting up the damage they do is not gonna do a lot, because you're still gonna get hit just as rarely as you do normally. And even when you do get hit, that double damage is not very high because they don't do very much damage to begin with. And so you are not challenged more, really, with Wind Waker's hero mode, in my opinion at least. Instead, they should have altered enemy AI. They should have made enemies attack faster, have more of them, so you have to actually adapt in a new way. You have to think more quickly, you have to adapt more quickly, and you are punished much harder for not being able to do that. That would be difficulty. But as it is now, it is just as easy to dodge enemies, and so that double damage basically does almost nothing for the experience overall. And that is what I mean with balancing in a video game, in a single player game, is important. Because just with the same argument as, well, if you don't like the mechanic, you can just pretend it doesn't exist and don't use it. You can also play hero mode and then intentionally take a bit more damage and take a bit more hits than you probably would have, and just pretend that, you couldn't move in certain situations, or you cannot dodge in certain situations in order to make the game more difficult. You can always do that, but that's not difficulty in my opinion. That is just pretending it is more difficult. And that is not the same at all. At that point, the game is not challenging you, but your imagination is challenging you. This creates artificial difficulty. It creates a difficulty that isn't really there. You're just pretending it is. So if a game is extremely easy, you can just make up new rules and apply them to your gameplay session and hope that you get a more difficult experience. But what most likely happens is that yes, you get a bit more challenged in it, but it's not going to feel organic. And this stuff like this is perfect for challenge runs, for example, of doing really unique challenge runs, which is really fun to watch and also really fun to play. But when it comes to the normal casual gamer that sees the game as a puzzle box that they want to solve, they're going to use every mechanic that game provides. They're going to go whichever route the game wants them to go. They're going to follow the game's rules, and they're going to do whatever they can with the limitations and tools the game gives them in order to try to overcome it and win. And if that includes some really powerful, overpowered, completely unbalanced feature, they're going to use it because it is part of the game. It's part of the game design, the game balance. Why wouldn't they use it? If they don't, they just pretend it doesn't exist. They just pretend the game is different from what it is. I think a game should challenge you in a way by really limiting you and forcing you to use those limitations to get better, because then the rewards you can achieve will be better, and the satisfaction of actually overcoming the challenges will be so much greater because you are doing your best and you are doing whatever you can with what you have in order to win. If you have to start pretending, then you're not really playing the game as it is anymore, in my opinion. And thus the game is not challenging you anymore, but you are challenging yourself. And those are two completely different things. Thanks a lot for watching. If you like this, subscribe to the channel. I talk about video game stuff and creative stuff, and sometimes also horror and mystery stuff as well. Mostly stuff regarding media, games, movies, etc. And I also have a really interesting video planned for the near future, hopefully. It is a huge, massive Zelda theory, which is here to explain everything. It is a theory I've worked on for years, actually, and it is here to really explain and connect the dots with most, if not all, of the huge questions and mysteries and contradictions we have had, especially with the latest two games of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And I believe I may have solved everything in a way that hasn't been done before. So look forward to that and subscribe if you want to see it. Have a good day, I will see you in the next video.